it's fair to say that the cultural narrative and the cultural waters that we are swimming in are all-consuming, but also incredibly challenging to navigate. But as Peter said, I think the Being Human Project is really keen not to enter into this polemic culture war argument and fight that we find ourselves in. Instead, how is Jesus coming into these spaces, into these conversations, into our communities, into our lives, and offering something that is truly good and beautiful to the people that we encounter? And so our next challenge is really how to rehumanize ourselves, our culture, and our narratives, and how do we use the God story to do that? So, in all honesty, if our cultural stories are as weak as we are potentially suggesting, and if the God story, the story of God and humanity is told throughout the pages of the Bible, is as strong as we're suggesting, well, why isn't it the strongest, most powerful, most recognized story in our culture today? Why has it been diminished? Why has it been sidelined? Why has it been questioned? Why isn't it as compelling as you or I may find it? Well, perhaps it's because this story too has been shrunk to become weak and ineffectual. We have in some ways ended up with a bit of a half story. So we have very little to offer that is different, unique, and powerful to the culture that we find ourselves in. This dazzling, complex, and nuanced, epic God story has been repeatedly and arguably deliberately shrunk for good intentions over the years. Because we began to communicate and live into a half story. A story that starts at the fall and ends with redemption. This half story is really simple. You can do it in 4 points, you can have little symbols, and you can tell people how it works. And basically, it is, we're all sinners. You have a problem, but Jesus turned to solve your problems, rose again, and now you can be saved. But this is a simple, short gospel that has led to this very individualistic idea of salvation. It's about me, it's about Jesus saving me, and it has this idea of saving souls for heaven and twiddling our thumbs now while we wait to die. It's great. So, as we start with sin, we don't start where the Bible starts. We don't start with creation, with blessing and a good world. Without an originally good world, we have no reason today to fight for better. Without blessing, how do we hunger for wholeness? Without creation, how do we respect all of life? The Christianity of Wilberforce and of Shaftesbury, of Carmichael and Martin Luther King, they needed a full gospel. It wasn't just about saving souls, but about wholesale cultural renewal. We cannot live fully human lives if the Christian story is limited to individual salvation. So there are two responses to this half story. One is to strip it back even further and to say that it's a bit awkward to point out that people are sinners in this expressive, authentic self, post-truth world. So instead, we just simply declare God is love. God loves you, he is for you, he accepts you, come and be loved by God. But this quarter story doesn't work. It's so shallow and thin, it's not even a gospel at all. It can barely carry the weight of our lives. So the other response, and arguably we would say the only response, is to dig deeper. To go into the fuller, deeper, richer, more hopeful narrative that is the God story. To rediscover the full gospel. To live in and share that gospel narrative that shows us the good, beautiful, and compelling truth of what it is to be human. The biblical story is complex and it's nuanced because human life is complex and nuanced. It's unique. While we are daily bombarded with different stories, this story is in a league of its own. It's the story that sets the foundations and lays the scene for all other stories. Our story starts in a garden. Once upon a time, the most benevolent, beautiful, powerful being danced across eternity. 3 persons united in an infinite relationship of love, sacrifice, and generosity. Everywhere that deity went, life spilled out. Creation overflowed like a fountain, unable to contain its abundance. Intentionality, exuberance, and sheer unbridled joy brought all things into existence. And the centerpiece of this epic symphony was humanity, infused with the very breath of life itself, made in the image and likeness of God. Man and woman stood at the heart of creation, and all was it should be. Creative, dynamic, powerful creatures, humanity reflected the character and nature of God, able to bless and steward, nurture and sustain the world around them. Access to life itself, sustained by his gifts, by his presence. Humanity flourishes. There is peace. It was good. This is the opening bookend of our story. This morning, as you've travelled here, struggled to get out the door, preoccupied by the bulging inbox of the emails that you haven't answered as you've been here, distracted by the urgent things that remain on your to-do list, expectant about what this conversation might look like and provide for you, or distracted by all the other things that are going on right now. Maybe just take a breath and remember the Spirit of God and his breath of life that fills your lungs. Take a moment to acknowledge that your story started with grace and peace and goodness and love. No matter what today looks like, your story started well. The opening chapters of the God story, Genesis 1-3, outline in beautiful poetry the truth of who God is and who we are in him. It's in these potent chapters that we're introduced to the idea that theologians called the Imago Dei, the image of God, that which Peter already alluded to a little while ago. So what do we mean by that? It's a weird and complex and jargony term. Well, I don't know here. Did anyone here ever meet the late Queen? Any Queenies? One. All right. Had she walked into any of your front doors, I'm going to guess, unlike Carl, you would have recognized her, right? If she walked into your space, if she had entered your room, you would have known instantly who she was. How am I so sure that you would have recognized her? Well, because you've seen countless objects bear her image. Tea towels, notes, coins, posters, your granny's coronation plates. Countless objects bear her image. And the same is now true for good old King Charles. Now, I have met King Charles. Well, I say met. He walked past me looking in entirely the opposite direction, but I'm claiming it. A couple of months ago, I was invited to a carol concert, and the host of the event, after the obligatory toilet directions and what to do in a fire, he said, we've got some lovely guests coming and joining us today. We're going to have the Archbishop of Canterbury, we've got these people, and we've got the King. And everyone sort of went, what did he just say, King? Oh, yes, we have one of those now. And we all got the room changed, and everyone started to get expectant. But what we didn't need was a poster on the screen to give us an idea of who to look for. We all knew exactly who he was the moment he entered the space. Because again, we have seen countless objects bear his image. Like the tea towels of the Queen or the newly minted coins of the King, an image-bearing object means that if you encounter that image, you recognize it because you have seen its likeness before. An object that bears another image isn't the image itself. It's not a clone or a repeat. It's a representation, a reflection, a signpost pointing back to the original. Image bearers represent, project, and share in the image's likeness. We are God's image bearers. We come from dust, but we are invited to so much more. We represent, project, and share in God's likeness. We are like him, and we get to do what he does. In the garden, as God creates, it is good, but something different happens when God gets to humanity. In Genesis 1:26, it says, "Let us make humankind in our image, in our likeness." We are created by him, and we receive the character, the nature, and the purposes of God. Like a child resembling his parents, what they look like and how they act, the type of character they have. We are made to represent and resemble God. Unlike the idols that we create, we are God's idols. We remind creation of him, and we inspire creation's worship. We've been given authority, and we point creation back to its creator. This is what it means to bear God's image. This is the idea of the Imago Dei. This is the beauty and the goodness at the foundation of every human story. So, if this is the foundation of what it means to be human, and our cultural stories have a very different understanding, how do we navigate this? How do we understand this? How do we engage as leaders in our churches, in our discipleships, in our evangelism, in our mission? What do we do? Well, the Being Human Project uses, hopefully, a lens to solve these 4 problems of the cultural narrative. So these are the problems that Peter painted earlier. Secularism and the problem of uncertainty, expressive individualism and the problem of the self-centeredness of our lives, postmodernism and the problem of deconstruction and disruption, and then just the problem of chaos that comes from the metazone. So if these are our problems, how do we explore them? Well, welcome to the Being Human lens. If it's a little bit small on the screen, you have them on your tables. We're very proud of ourselves. Welcome to the Being Human lens. You've also got a few pieces of information on said postcard. Who knew the QR code was going to find its day? I never thought I'd see a day when the QR code, but thanks to COVID, QR codes have flourished. So there's a couple of QR codes on there. The first one is a little feedback. So we would love to hear your thoughts on today's session so that we can improve and make this make more sense to people. So on the front, you've got a QR code for feedback. On the back, you've got QR codes to keep in touch with us and find out more about the Being Human Project. We've got a book out in the autumn. We've got video series for small groups and stuff. We've got a podcast coming out in the summer. Websites being launched hopefully in a few months' time. So lots of things to keep up to date with, so do check it out. But the purpose of the postcard is the Being Human lens. So, how many here are wearing glasses, contact lenses, no sunglasses today, unfortunately? Who here uses lenses? Excellent, my fellow blind people. I am a contact lens wearer. I love the gift of peripheral vision. But what is interesting about my contacts is I don't have to think about them. They go in at the beginning of the day, they come out at the end of the day, unless they get a bit sticky or smudged during the day, because I've worn them for 9 months instead of 1. They do their job. Through them, I see the world. Every now and then I have to clean them. Occasionally, Specsavers nag me to go and get an appointment to get them checked. But by and large, their purpose is to help me see the world around me. Today is a little bit like that trip to Specsavers. We're having a little look at our lens. But normally, we just see through it to see the world around us. So let's take a little trip to the opticians. At the centre is our focal point. What does it mean to be human? Christianity is this deep revelation of all of reality, including how we as human beings exist within God. But it's more than a revelation. It's an invitation to the new humanity found in Jesus, an invitation to the truly good and beautiful life of significance, connection, presence, and participation. These are the 4 core aspects of what it means to be human and how we encounter our humanity, individually and collectively. So let's start at the top. We explore this lens much more fully in the book that is coming out in September. Peter and I are in the wonderful stage of second edits. It's not painful at all, but it will be out in the autumn, so do keep in touch with us. This is just a teaser of some of the content that will be in there, but hopefully this will be enough to whet your appetite. Okay, so starting at the top, the human truth of significance. You matter. Every single human being matters. Not because of what you do, not because of who your parents are, not because you've got the surname Frost and therefore can stand up at a conference and talk, but because you bear God's image. You matter. The uncertainty that rages thanks to the secular narrative has made us question everything, including who knows us and if they know us. Do they still deem us significant? Who are we important to? Who can tell you that you matter? That longing, that pain, that insecurity deep in each of our hearts, that comes from the invitation of a God to say, I know you. From the moment of your conception, as you were knitted together, I know you. You bear my image. You are important to me. The God story, and especially the life of Jesus, shows us that there is a good and true God who knows us and invites us to know him too. This is the God story of significance. The second aspect of the lens is connection. This idea that humanity is connected to each other. No man is an island. We matter to each other. But the cultural narrative of the self-centered disrupted the orbit where God is at the center of creation and instead put me at the center. And that is not a good fit. Imagine did you ever play with magnets and iron filings as a kid? Those wonderful science experiments where you could move things around. But if you flip the poles, all of a sudden the patterns change. And what was far away comes close, and what was close gets pushed away. It's as if we flipped the poles of our connections. Instead of God being the conduit through which we relate to each other, we put us individually at the center, and everything got turned around. We matter to each other. But when we matter to each other based on what we want and what we need, fear and desires start to control and disrupt our relationships. But instead, in the God story, and especially through the life of Jesus, we see a loving and reconciling God who pursues his enemies and invites them into friendship. To be human is to crave connection in a world of self-centeredness and fear. But God selflessly and bravely loves us and enables us to love others the same. As we move to the bottom of the lens, we enter into this place of presence. Lockdown was brutal. Lockdown took us away from our physicality of place and of time. We lived on screens. How many people know Charlie Mackey? No, is that right, the surname? Maxey, sorry. The boy, the goat, the donkey, everyone, yeah? Him. How many times did he post on social media a hug? Because it was the thing we were craving. We are embodied people. We exist in a time and in a place. You are rooted in a place and you are positioned for a season. Your presence matters. We live in virtual, hyper-connected worlds that distance ourselves and distort and disrupt and disconnect and deconstruct in every conceivable way. And yet the God story tells us of the incarnation of Jesus made flesh, who moved amongst us, the come near God, the Emmanuel, the title, with us God, who invites us to become, who comes near us, becoming like us so that we don't ever need to be alone. We live in a lonely, isolated, exhausting, and chaotic world, which Peter is naming the meta zone. And this is the participation, do it. Form yourself, make your truth, change your world, live your life, bask in your light. The responsibility on each of our shoulders to live well and not hurt somebody else is overwhelming. But the God story, and especially the story of Jesus, shows us an image of an active, generous God who knows how to stop, who invites us to rest, who commissions us to partner with him and bring order out of chaos, hope in hopeless places, and light in the darkness. The God story pivots on the person and life of Jesus. He is the only fully human figure ever to have lived. He is the true image of God, who emptied himself so that he might elevate us and humanity back to its true image-bearing role. It's Jesus who shows us life in all its fullness. It's Jesus who rehumanizes culture and our identity and invites us back to how we should be. It's Jesus who manages what every day we cannot, who knew the Father, was loved by the Father, who drew close like the Father and brought life out of darkness like the Father. It's Jesus that we point to when we search for our humanity and we encounter others who are asking, what does it mean to be human? Through all Jesus says and does, Jesus teaches, demonstrates, and creates a new way of being human. He shows us how to be fully, truly, beautifully bearing the image of God. This is Jesus' invitation to each of us into his new humanity. We get to be, through him, who we were always supposed to be, representatives of God's goodness and his power, his image bearers here on earth. So to close before we go to discussion, I want to end with these words. They're a paraphrase of the last words spoken by Jesus to his disciples before he returned to be with the Father. Words that have been brought to life through the lives of humans as they have sought to understand, articulate, and participate in the biblical vision of what it means to be human. So Matthew 28, verses 19 and 20 in this paraphrase says, as you go and live your lives, help everyone you encounter to become imitators of Jesus. Immerse them in a community built on the characteristics of and the relationship between God the Father, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. Enable everyone to put into practice Jesus' instructions for life, to love God with all that they do, say, think, feel, and will, and to love others as you are loved. This is the manifesto of what it is to be human. This is our mandate, our commission. It's our turn to put it into action. So to close, you have 10 minutes and we will do a little Q&A towards the end. But these are your discussion questions in your whistle-stop tour of how to rehumanize cultural narratives through the God story. What was helpful? Did any of it stick or make sense? Which of the Being Human lens's core aspects do you encounter most? People's quest for significance, their hunger for connection, their need for presence, or the questions around their participation? How can you tell this richer, fuller story of being human where you are and positioned in this season? And maybe discuss what's next. How do you take this further?